Song and for it is good to have you with us this morning. And we are glad to have you visitors with us. And this ain't a preaching class. This is a get in there and use your elbows and whatever you want to say. You're welcome to say it. Because I'll probably say a lot of things that'll give you every opportunity to. But anyhow, we have a Saturday morning class too. We're studying through Revelation. Richard right here directs our minds in that. And here I am. What I'm going to talk about, I was just guilty of just a minute ago. He was talking about the dragon in the 12th chapter. And my immediate question was, what do you think about those dragons? He said, well, he's talking about Satan. I said, yeah, but the dragons, the fire-breathing dragons. See, I'm getting more involved in that than the actual lesson that he taught, this deal about Satan. So that is what we want to talk about a few minutes this morning. Not that, but it's how I believe that we get off track sometimes when we do study. And we probably talked about this many times, but sometimes we get more involved in the events that happened, which are important, the events that happened during Bible times, Old Testament times, and New Testament times. We get more bogged down in the mechanics of what happened, and we fail to do what? Well, the why, and what is the lesson for me? Because I certainly can't go back and relive those times, but I can find out as much as I can about those times, and I can see how that may apply to me in my life. He tells us, I'll turn, because I don't, my memory's not all that great when it comes to trying to remember. When he talks about Paul's telling Timothy in 2 Timothy 3:16, all Scripture is inspired by God and is profitable for teaching, rebuking, for correcting, for training in righteousness, so the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. And what he talks about the Scripture. So what is he talking about? He's talking about the Old Testament, the lessons that are learned in the Old Testament for them. That's all it could. They didn't have anything else at that time other than these letters they're fixing to pass around. But the other one that I had, there's more, but in Romans 14th chapter, I'm sorry, 15th chapter, in verse 4, he says, whatever was written in the past was written for our instruction, so that we may have hope through endurance and through the encouragement from the Scriptures. So sometimes too much weight this is my opinion, and a bunch of things I say is my opinion, and if you disagree, just raise your hand and say, well, I differ with you, and that's fine, I can assure you. That's okay with me. But again, too often we get too bogged down, and I'm guilty of this, and he knows I'm guilty of this, in the study we're going through, because we may differ on exactly what the events are that we're talking about. We may have differences of opinion on it, but what is the lesson that I'm going to get from whatever we're talking about? And most of the time, regardless of my opinion and your opinion, the lesson we're going to get is pretty much the same. So, and that's the important part of it. We have a hard time doing that sometimes. We want to know the ABCs and don't want to how to make words out of them. But we want to know those ABCs. And too often it's not to our advantage. Somebody asked me, was it John, you just asked me a while ago about that friend. Wasn't that you? Yes. You know, I have told you that I have been for I don't know, a year and a half. I don't know how long it's been, Tricia. John. It's been a good while. It's from another totally separate religious understanding of the Scriptures. I mean, totally not understanding really the Scriptures. When you don't know who Jesus was, I mean, to me that's a total. Doesn't matter much about how much of the Scripture you know. If you don't know who Jesus is, then you're really wading around and getting in deep water if you don't know, and you're not going to learn. But we talked. Me and this guy, he would call me every week on Thursdays, and we would talk. Now I hadn't heard from him in 3 weeks. I'm going to text him, and I'm just going to ask him, if I've offended you in any way, I'm not sorry. I'm just kidding. No, if I offended him, and I try not to do that, but he never in all that time, we would start a discussion. He never had an answer in his head for anything. I could hear him turning in that book, their question and answer book, or the information they send them about, an interpretation of each verse. That's what I would hear him turning to. And I asked him one time, I said, John, do you ever disagree with the groups that you're part of? Oh, yeah. And I've asked him before, would you please tell me some of the things that you may differ on? I mean, I'm curious. But the information, the conversation would not really, wouldn't really help at all, because he was very vague about things. But before we look at something else that I did want to talk about, if you have a Bible, I want you to tell me, this is because of things I hear in the news all the time. And I've probably brought this up in a class if I've had before here. In Isaiah 45, verse 12 and verse 18, it's interesting. We're talking about the God alone is the manufacturer or the giver of everything we see. And in verse 12 he says, I made the earth and I created man on it. Then down here in verse 18 he says, for this is what Jehovah says, God is the creator of the heavens. He formed the earth and made it. He established it. He did not create it to be empty, but formed it to be inhabited. So what is a lesson that you can get from that? Just those two little verses there. Well, I don't ever, Richard, you always ask the right question. I don't ever ask the right question. Now, Jennifer? Okay, everything is here because he put it here. Is that okay? I can't have here.
There was a purpose behind it.
Okay, making the earth. There was a purpose for making this earth. What's one of the purposes that he made this earth?
Adam and Eve.
Sir?
Adam and Eve.
Okay, well, man. Putting man here. Now, see, what I see, that is exactly correct. But are there any implications for you here other than that? When he says, I made this earth, I made it to be inhabited. Are there any implications that he doesn't actually say here? But I draw from this. Well, that's exactly right. He wants us to enjoy all this. He's not wanting us to walk around with old head down, kicking the can down the road. Yes, sir.
I try to teach this to my children by way of telling them that everything that they think they own, I own.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point.
God started out in that verse and he said, I'm the one who made this. Now, he may let me be a steward of it, like I let my children be a steward of the things that they think they've earned.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's important for them to know, not because I care about the perfumes they got on the shelf and all those things all that much, but it's important to know they're just being stewards of my stuff.
Right, that's exactly right.
When they get out there and they realize that I'm emulating what God wants me to emulate for them, when they get out there and they're on their own car and they got their own things, they're just being stewards of the stuff that
That's
God
right.
gave them. And the way they know that is because I tell them, hey, that's mine. You just get to use it. That very first implication of that verse is God owns all this.
Yeah. And for us to know our place in creation, we need to be able to be aware of that. Yes, ma'am.
The thing I thought of when it said that he created this earth to be inhabited, he didn't create the other planets to be inhabited.
Mercy. Mercy.
So all these folks that think there's life somewhere else haven't read that verse.
Well, that's what I mean. When I'm talking about the implications other than what he actually says here, Mary.
Bouncing off of what he said, it's the same for us with God. It's God's stuff,
That's right.
you know, and we get to thinking more stuff, more stuff, more stuff. It's just God's stuff.
That's right. That's right.
He's gonna give you the stuff you need.
He just lends it to us for a while. But space travel. Oh, I'm sorry, Philip. You talking about true love here among brethren? We got it, boy.
It posits the question that is the earth here for us to save? We have all this, laws of litigation. Sometimes it goes to extremes of trying to save the earth, and people don't realize the earth is here for us. This is God,
Well, what is the main scientists? What are they trying to do right now as far as rocketry and all that stuff? And I mean, what are they trying to do with all that stuff right now? NASA and all those people.
Everything goes to science.
But what are they trying to do with all that? What's the goal for them?
To go live on another planet.
To go to other planets. And why is that? Why are they telling us they're doing that? Well, this earth, the sun's going to burn out in 1 billion years or whatever it is, and we got to be ready, see? And they missed the whole point. It was never intended to be here all that time. I'm one of the ones that I do not believe any life will be found anywhere. And you may be a scientist or study this stuff and know more than I do about it. That's what makes the earth different to me than every other body in the universe. We talk about ecoplanets. I mean, let me tell you something. These telescopes they got in space, I think, is a marvel. Now, I really do. I think that's something what they can see. And they're seeing planets in other solar systems and trying to tell us that they have the same properties as this planet here that we live on. And how long would it take to get there? That's what I mean. The point is, we can't get there anyhow. Based on what's the fastest we could ever travel? Speed of light, as far as I know. After that, we're going backwards in time if we can go faster than that. But the point is, he made this, and he wants us to know that I made this especially for you, for creation. And I just wanted to. Mary, did you have something?
I was just gonna ask the question, would it be a faith buster for you if they did find life on another planet? God can do anything he wants to.
But we've had no indication anyhow.
He doesn't have to listen.
We got a rover on Mars that we can look at all the time. It's got things all the time that they're showing. And it's just not a place that I'd want to go live when I look at it. And because of the weight situation, he fixed this planet to where the gravity was what our body needs to function. Andrew?
I just look at it this way. There's other beings that God created, correct? Angels, demons. There's other things out there that aren't human, that exist in reality.
Okay, and that's right. But you know, the difference is we're trying to find something better to survive. It never was intended to be here forever. That's the whole point. The earth was never intended to be here forever. I mean, it was dying the moment it was created. Once it was created, I mean, it had a lifespan. Only God knows. But it's just interesting how a lot of our efforts go to try to find something else that's equal to this. And we're not, I just don't believe that it's ever going to be found, because I believe this is why he says this. I formed it and I established it. I didn't create it to be empty, but I formed it to be inhabited. And that's the difference.
Dan, I think a good summary passage of everything's been said is Psalm chapter 8.
Did you read it?
Oh, I thought you were going to read it. 3 through 9.
Psalms 8.
3 through 9.
Okay.
And then it just summarizes everything you've said and what the class has said.
Psalms 8, 3 through 9. When I observe your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon, the stars, which you set in place, what is man that you remember him? The son of man that you look after him? You made him a little less than God and crowned him with glory and honor. You made him Lord over the works of your hands. And you put everything under his feet, all the sheep and the oxen, as well as the animals in the wild, the birds of the sky, the fish of the sea, that pass through the currents of the sea. And then he says, Jehovah our Lord, how magnificent is your name throughout the earth. I love exploration. I think that is great. It's the conclusion sometime I think we come to, and those conclusions are supposed to be answers for problems that we have. And I don't think that it's, I think we spend a lot of time doing that when we ought to be spending a whole lot more time on things that would make us better people right here on this earth and better Christians here on this earth. In Matthew, this is what I was going to talk about. It's interesting. In Matthew 23, Jesus goes in the temple. Now see, as a backdrop, see, here are things to me that people disagree on. What's he talking about? What's this mean? What's that mean? That's the problem I think we have. I have had it. I'm just going to tell you, maybe you have never had it, but I've gotten more into the mechanics of the actual, what is he talking about as far as those people were concerned. More into, let me see if there's any lessons in there for me. And I'll tell you what, in Matthew 23, he starts out with one. He's talking to a group of people in the temple here and to his disciples. And he says, the scribes and the Pharisees are seated in the chair of Moses. What's he mean when he says that? In the chair of Moses. They are, I guess what we'd call, they're the bosses. In other words, they sit in the position of authority. And he tells them, he says, so be ready to do what they tell you to do, but don't do what they do. That's pretty interesting, because they don't practice what they preach. And that's what they were guilty of. They love that power, they love that authority. Because of that motivation, they killed Jesus, because of that very thing. But then he starts, so as the next chapter starts, after he tells them, he says, you're going to pay for all that, though. Y'all say, in this chapter, y'all say that if y'all had lived back in those days of the prophets, you'd have never did what they did. You'd have never killed and persecuted those prophets that were prophesying to you about helping your life. He said, y'all say y'all would have never done that, but yet they were guilty of the same thing. They were fixing to do that same thing to Christians, people that wanted to follow Jesus. And he tells them down in the verse 36, he said, so I'm going to tell you, this is the conclusion after he goes through here. He said, you people, this is pretty tough now. You people are going to be held responsible. I'm charging all of that to y'all because you know better, so you just told me you did, because if you'd have been here, you wouldn't have done it. He says, I'm charging it, all that blood from all those people. Who does he say he's starting with? Whose blood is he starting with? Abel. I mean, that was more than 10 years ago, wasn't it, Steve? That was the first one. I'm holding y'all responsible for his blood. He said, it's going to happen in your generation. I'm going to do that. He goes over to the very next chapter, and here's where there's, to me, differences of opinions and understandings of some of the things he says here. But pushing that aside, what would be a lesson for me as I look through some of these things? He leaves there, and I don't know whether the apostles did this because I don't know what Jesus' temperament was when he said all the things. Now, he was, I don't think, talking directly to the Pharisees, but he's talking to them as if he were, because obviously some of them were listening, but he's talking to other people that were really interested in hearing what he had to say. And so I don't know how fired up he got, in other words, because he was known to get a little animated sometime, I think. But he leaves, and I think the apostles might have been sort of trying to, cool him down a little bit, maybe. This is speculation. You may look at it totally different. And so to get his mind off of that, look at these buildings, how magnificent they are. And then he drops another bombshell on these people and tells them all this is going to be destroyed. And so then they want to know about this. When's all this going to happen? Wow. And he starts giving them these signs. Now, to start with, as I read down through here, what are we looking for today? What do we see on the horizon? Maybe the horizon may be in 15 minutes. But what are we looking for? Ma'am? Right, well, the end of time. And the reason I'm specific about that, because in some translation he's talking about the end of the world, and he ain't talking about the end of time, I think. But I know exactly what you're talking about. But we see this as not giving us a lot of signs for the end of time. What's the point for us? When if I'm not expecting a whole lot of signs, what conclusion do I come to? Be ready all the time, okay? So really these people are fixing to have an earth-shaking event happen, and he wants the Christian people to be protected from this, and he starts telling them about some signs that they can look for, so when this occurs, they can be protected from it. But the kind of things that I believe that people may misunderstand a little bit are things like this. And I may be wrong about this. And if I am, that's okay. He says in verse of Matthew 24, verse 13, he says, but the one who endures to the end will be delivered. It makes no difference what the end he's talking about is. It doesn't matter what the end he's talking about. My lesson from that is to remain faithful to the end of time or my life, so that he will give me a crown of life. That's already the lesson I take from that. I can speculate. People can speculate on what they think he's talking about here. But he said the good news of the kingdom will be, he's giving them signs for something that's coming. And he says, good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. What end? What are they asking him about? What has he just told them is going to happen sometime in the, I would say, near future, I guess you would say. Ma'am? The destruction of, I mean, their place of the presence of God and everything is going to be destroyed. It's not the first time it's happened, but the point is, it's fixing to happen again. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and see that, and of course that's another point to be made. The reason, to me sometimes that people would come to the conclusion that he's referring to the end of time is because there's got to be this kingdom it's got to be a kingdom before all this can happen. And so the apostles, I think, are looking at it and saying, well, okay, if we got to get through that, let's get that. But then when are you going to come straighten all this out? And so what's the normal answer for the religious world today? What's going to happen? Well, sir? Steve said you don't even know anymore. You're right, because, hey, it's every day something new. I mean... Yeah, that's right, exactly. When you keep in context, I mean, it's amazing. But I'm telling you, people, I've always believed this from the bottom of my heart. If a person was seeking the truth of what God intends for us to understand, not everything in this Bible, but I believe that it will come before them in some form or fashion. If a person is seeking the truth, why would God ever hide it from people? If he wants everyone to be saved, why would he hide that from them? Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to have exactly the same number of chances, but if people are truly looking for the truth, I believe it's going to be provided for them. I can't see God not allowing when he wants all people to be with him. But so when we're talking about this end right here, and not get bogged down in exactly the end he's talking about, the point is, what am I supposed to, what's my lesson from that? It's that as I have an opportunity to share the gospel with somebody, then I ought to be doing it. And so that's what he says. This gospel that he says must go into all the world and then the end will come. No, I technically don't believe he's talking about the end of time at all. I think he's talking about this event that he's talking about that is coming on those people, and he's trying to give them an opportunity to be more ready for it because they are going to have some obligations to do. And he turns right over. Some of the... I hear some of the preachers and whatnot on TV talk about this. They will say, for example, in verse 5, many will come in my name saying, I'm the Messiah, and they will deceive many. You're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars, and they will say, you see all these things going on? Let me ask you this. Some of you historians, Andrew used to sit over here. He was a historian. How many times in history has that not been a fact? How many times in history has there been total world peace to start with? Do you know of any time?
I think it's less than 10%.
Yeah, it's not much. Somebody's always wanting something somebody else has. But he says, you're going to hear of these wars. Don't be alarmed. He's talking about directly involved with these people. He's talking to these people about things in their life that's going to happen. So he says, you're going to see all these things. Don't be upset because they must take place, but the end is not yet. Nation will rise up against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There'll be famines, earthquakes in various places. All these events are the beginning of birth pains. And I hear preachers on TV attribute all that to today. That's okay. That's all right with me. But the point is they're looking for an event that's going to happen that's not really going to happen. And that's what Steve was referring to a while ago over here. They're looking for an event that I used to want to argue with people about, and I realized, why in the world would you want to get into a discussion so much about that? I'm talking about things referring to, what do they call it when these Christians are going to be just taken away all of a sudden? The rapture. And the reason I don't is because the phrase they use, are you rapture ready? Okay? So that same thing that they use, are you ready for Jesus' second coming? I mean, that's my lesson. It's not to get bogged down into going through all of that, because the problem most of the time is that people who would lend themselves to that is okay with me. I don't think it's a problem. I don't have a problem with it. But are you ready for the second coming of Christ? That's the question. And too often, if people have been misled, they're probably not. And so it's our obligation to do just what he says for them to do. Later on, it was their responsibility to go into the world and to preach the gospel. And so then he gets to this little phrase here, and he says in verse 15, so when you see this abomination, some may say the abomination of desolation, he says it causes desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, those who in Judea flee to the mountains. So as a reference to what that means, I just turned over to Luke, the 21st chapter, and he says the same thing, like he starts in verse 10, giving these signs, and he says, down in verse 20, he starts talking about these signs, but down in verse 20 he says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that its desolation has come near. And those who are in Judea flee to the mountains inside, and those who are inside the city leave it. And those who are in the country don't enter it. Because these are the days of vengeance to fulfill all the things that are written. So the point is, I take all of that and I put it into those things have happened long ago. And so you have to take those same lessons and apply them to the end of time, where there are no signs necessarily for us to look. It's just to talk to people about the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that's the bottom line for us. It's not to get all involved in what every little item here means. Those studies are okay. There's nothing wrong with those studies if it's in this book, but our obligation to me is to apply them to where they're supposed to be applied to. But what lessons can I take for me today? Because I'm not sitting around concerned about wars and rumors of wars for some event that's going to happen. Me. Now you may, and that's okay too. But it's how these things apply to me. So the main point, I think, in a lot of things in this book here, it's not so much the mechanics of what he's actually talking about is for us. It's the lessons that come from those things for us. You know, how serious do I take those same lessons, which is exactly why we have a lot of this in the scripture, and that's to better prepare us for, number one, is to make sure we are ready for, you call it what you want to, but I'm talking about the end of time. It's up to us to be prepared, to be ready to meet Christ. I mean, that's the bottom line for us. Their problem and their concern was an event that was coming upon them that was much bigger at that time than I look at it. It was not that great big of an event to me because it didn't happen to me. But that event was something that they needed to know about. And I don't know if you've looked at any history stuff, but I'm just, based on what I've read. You may have a different view altogether, that's okay. But a Assyrian legion from Rome came down, I think it was maybe 67 or 68, and surrounded Jerusalem and was going to capture Jerusalem then. And the Josephus, the historian, said for Noah, I'm going to put it in human terms because it's hard to read that guy's writings to me. For no apparent reason, they just withdrew. They started to withdraw when it says all they had to do was walk up and just knock on the door and they'd open the gates to them. There was so much infighting going on inside Jerusalem and so much pestilence, hunger, couldn't find food, but anyhow, and they started to leave. And the Jewish army that was inside the city didn't want them carrying those war machines off with them, so the Jewish army, what was in there, left to go get those war machines. What did the Christians see that as an opportunity for? To leave. When you see the city surrounded, look, if they were still out there, they couldn't leave. They'd have killed them. So they saw that as an opportunity, and he had told them, when you see the city surrounded, or this people where they shouldn't have been, which is this the abomination of desolation, I think that's what he's talking about. When you see all that happen, know that the end is near, and if you're in the city, get out of the city. And I think that was the opportunity that God gave them. See, they needed that opportunity. They needed those kind of warnings for that event that was fixing to come in their life. So they was able to leave and they escaped, and that's how God protected them. He protects us constantly through this. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Well, I mean, that's what he says. That's what he means. Resist him and he'll leave. Will he be back? Well, sure, he'll be back later. But God will offer us comfort. And so I have to look at all of these things to see the lessons. Have you ever heard of anybody calling themselves deconstructing from Christianity? Have you ever heard that expression, deconstruction? It's just Christian life, they said, is just not what it was written about in this book. What are we promised if we really want to live righteous? What are we promised we would consider on the negative side? What are we promised? Sir? Well, no, I said on the negative side. There ain't nothing negative about that.
We're promised that it ain't going to be easy.
That's right. It's not going to be easy all the time, but there's always someone we can look to. That's exactly right. Not only God, but also our fellow Christians. And it happens here all the time. We're going to quit a minute too early here. If you hadn't met our visitors here from Valdosta, Georgia. Are all y'all from Valdosta? And I just asked the young man a while ago back there, I keep forgetting it's Lowndes County. Okay. I keep thinking about Moultries in Colquitt. Okay. But anyhow, big football capital. When I was growing up, yeah. If you spelled football, Valdosta. But look, I appreciate everybody being here this morning, and it's good to see y'all, and hope you stay around. Any other comments before we stop here? Okay, then tell me in private. Jump on me in private.